This is one that always causes arguments, especially between the pros, funnily enough. And the first one, which is probably the most common question that we get asked at the boat shows and things like that, is brushes, paint pads, rollers, rags. What do we put paint on with? And the honest answer to that is that if you put, we've got lots of beautiful images from some of the pro guys around the country coming up as we go through these slides. And if you put them all in a room, they'll be there 2 weeks later arguing the best way to put these things on. As a general rule, and probably the most common, certainly I tend to use in my when I've been painting what's something called roll and tip when we're doing hand painting outside. And there's a couple of reasons for this, and most of the pros will do something similar. They might vary it between paint pads and all sorts of things, and they'll all have their favourite brushes, but we tend to roll and tip. And the reason for that is that the roller is exceptionally good at putting on an even coat of paint. So, and the image here on the right, becoming quite popular with the trade at the moment, are these concave rollers. So instead of the roller being round at the end, they're radiator rollers. They're concave, and what that does is it leaves a little pressure off the end and helps get rid of the line that you can sometimes get off the end of the roller. Particularly helpful if you're doing non-skid decks, by the way. But the roller gets an even coat on. Now, when you get a roller tray, it's got a bath of paint, and then it's got an area behind that bath, which you usually use to sit your roller on. That has another purpose, and the purpose is when you load the paint roller with paint, it is to roll it up and down that, making sure you get a full rotation on it, and it's to even the paint across the roller, so you don't get a big lump of paint. We've all done it. I know I'm guilty. You haven't rolled it off enough and you sort of get a big dollop of paint and then a little less and then a big dollop of paint. You don't want that. You want a nice even coat of paint. So don't forget to use the roller tray as it's designed to. So rollers are really good at getting even coats of paint on, but they do tend to leave sort of a peely finish in it, sort of a profile in the paint. And quite often with the foam rollers, they leave air bubbles in them as well. So we then go to a high quality brush and we call it tip it off. Now, you would have your brush alongside you, and you would have a little bit of paint loaded onto the brush, not too much, just enough just to wet the end of the bristles out. So as you roll down the boat, you don't go too far. You then pull the paintbrush over with long strikes, longest strikes you can do. Some people go up, some people go down. Some people go along the boat, doesn't really matter, but nice long strikes, not too much pressure. You're just trying to even the paint film out and get rid of those little imperfections that the rollers put in. And in the middle of that picture, you've got the Epiphanes brushes. Now, these are very much a brush for life, not just for Christmas. They're quite expensive. They're animal hair. And if you've heard the ladies complain about split ends on their hair, it's because the same thing. These animal hairs, they've got split ends. So for every bristle in a brush, you have two at the other end. And that gives a much finer finish. The brush on the left have become much more popular. So along with the animal, you get wild boar, badger, all sorts of different animals used for that. But a little bit more politically correct these days, you have the synthetic brush on your left. And if you can see in that picture, the end of the bristles are white, and that's because they've been split. So it's a synthetic brush, but they've become much more popular. Again, paint pads also work, lots of things. Just be aware, you don't want to go too far with your paint before you tip it off. So just work maybe as far as you can strike the paint from left to right or up and down. Don't go too far. The paint's drying. Especially important with 2-packs. You might want a pal if you're doing a 2-pack, because you might want to be one person rolling, one person painting, because you don't want to come back to it too late and leave a mark in it. You also hear people talk about a wet edge, and a wet edge is just making sure that you're not leaving an area of paint that you're going back to too late. So you try and work along an area and not go back to it. So you try and work it all the way from waterline to the top of the top side, so go long, so you're not leaving an edge that you're going to come back to half an hour later, and the paintbrush is going to suddenly drag across there and leaving some unsightly marks. Good news is that most paints from all paint manufacturers want at least 3 coats. A lot of you put 2 on, but 3 coats is recommended. So you're a dab hand at this by the time you get to coat number 3.